till it picks up.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can.
On the speakers?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's coming through.
And what about me?
Speak loud. Yeah.
Okay. Myra's not here. Okay.
Is she coming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She should be coming.
Hi, everyone. We're just going to get started. If you could take a second to answer our poll on slido.com before we begin, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks.
No.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this morning. My name is Sophie Cardona. I work with NYSERDA. I actually run the commercial tenant program at NYSERDA. And we collaborated with ERS and IEC to put together this training for you all this morning. So the commercial tenant program, some of you might know it, have participated in it. It's been on the street or operational for about 1.5 years now. And through its implementation and through a lot of the outreach that we've done and conversations with some of you as well as with a lot of your colleagues, we really identified the need for a training of this kind, right? A training that really focuses on issues around incorporating energy efficiency in tenant spaces. And so last week, we did the first training in our series, which was really focused on business development or selling energy efficiency for tenant spaces. And this week, we're focusing on some more of the technical aspects of energy efficiency in tenant spaces. So what I want to do before I hand things over to my colleagues to dive into the training is just to provide a quick overview of the commercial tenant program for those of you who might not already know about it. So the program is targeted at commercial office spaces that are leased, so tenant spaces. And the goal of the overall intent of the program is really to incorporate energy efficiency in tenant spaces at whatever point in time in the process makes sense, and for really all commercial tenants that are in office spaces. Now, we know that when you're thinking about designing a high-performing space or renovating a space to upgrade it to be more energy efficient, there are opportunities that come along the way that are not just energy efficiency, but other co-benefits that are linked to wellness and health and higher productivity for occupants of the space. And these are all things that are very important, and it's interesting to see the connection between energy efficiency and those co-benefits as well. And wellness is a big buzz in the industry right now, so definitely something to keep in mind. So the commercial tenant program is trying to sort of tackle all of these things with the intent of really incorporating and making tenant spaces a lot more energy efficient because it represents such a huge opportunity. So in terms of the program per se, it is a technical assistance program. And so in NYSERDA speak, this means that we're not providing incentives to help buy down the cost of installing the energy efficiency measures. We're doing everything that comes before, right? So it's the energy analysis, it's the financial analysis, it's identifying the opportunities for injecting energy efficiency in the design or the renovation of the space. The funding is up to 100% of the cost of the energy study. So typically, we do 50% of the cost of the study when we get a final report, something that outlines all of the recommendations. And then the other 50% is dispersed when the tenant actually installs something, one or more of the recommendations from the study. As I said, we can work with really tenants of any size that are at any point in the leasing cycle. So this could be a tenant moving into a new space and really designing it from scratch. It can be a tenant looking to do a major renovation, or it could be a tenant that's maybe mid-lease or maybe a little bit further along and just wants to identify some basic things that they can do to make their space a little bit more energy efficient. The funding is capped at $50K per project. And we are able to work with tenants as well as building owners. So again, as long as your customer, your client, is occupying an office space, they're leasing that space, we can most likely do an energy study in that space and really help you serve that client, whether it's a tenant or a building owner. And if you want some more information on how those mechanics might actually work, I'm going to be around, and I'm certainly happy to provide more information about the mechanics and the details of the program. Program-wide, we have almost $6 million for this program. It's first come, first serve. We have allocated a little under half of our resources so far, so we have a significant amount of funds left to go. If you go to our website and you read our program documentation, you'll see that the program is slated to end in the summer of 2019. Don't let that discourage you from going out to get projects, because that date will get pushed out. The program has been quite successful, so we are definitely going to extend it. And then just a technical point here, in order to be eligible to participate in the program, the building that the tenant space is in has to contribute to the system's benefit charge. So here in Con Ed territory, you're most likely covered, but it's always good to check. And then this is just a quick snapshot of some of our program participants. So I think, if anything here, you can see that we've worked with many different building owners, tenants of all shapes and sizes, nonprofit organizations, tech companies, lots of law firms actually have participated in the program. So this just gives you a little taste of who has participated in the program to date. So with that, I will hand the baton over to Kelly to dive into the training. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. Hi, everyone. My name's Kelly O'Connell. I don't know what happened to the slide here. Something messed up the formatting. I work for ERS. I'm a project engineer too. I've been in the industry for about 3 years now. Through my time in the industry, I've focused on outreach as well as program evaluation. I've conducted evaluations for NYSERDA as well as other utilities in, excuse me, in New York as well as New England and California. My education was in civil engineering, but I had a major focus in energy as well as a minor in mechanical engineering. And during my time at Northeastern, I was also heavily involved in Engineers Without Borders. And I was on 3 trips to Uganda and Honduras to install student-designed water distribution systems. So before we dive into the content, I have a couple housekeeping items. Just so you're all aware, there may be a little bit of background noise. They're filming Law and Order down the hall. And so we've worked with them to try to help have them keep the noise down, but just disregard any mayhem you see in the hallways. Also, Elihu and Gita are in the back room doing sign-ins. If you haven't checked in with them yet, please make sure to do so we can get your AIA credits. We have 2 exercises that we'll be doing live with you today. Anybody on the live stream, these don't transfer too well, so just hang in tight while we're doing those. And we'll be doing a 15-minute break in the middle. If you need to use the restroom, the men's room is down the hall and to the left. The women's room is all the way down the hall. You have to take the half flight of stairs down one, and it's right at the bottom of the stairs. And lastly, for anyone that was here last week, we have a bit of overlap, so just hang in tight, but we'll be pretty brief on the overlapping sections. So what we're going to be covering today is some accessing the program, which is what Sophie just covered. I'll be sharing a bit about the market potential in New York with commercial tenants. We'll be busting some myths that are common in the commercial tenant space to help you access your clients better. We'll be talking about some unique measures that are really important to focus on in tenant spaces. We'll give you a quick 15-minute break so you can refill your coffee and whatnot. Then I'll be passing it off to my colleague Anastasia, who will be covering how to conduct financial analyses and then how to present your findings in a persuasive way. Lastly, we'll just open the floor up to a general discussion. If you have any questions about the program or feedback about how the program can help you more, we're interested in having a dialogue there. So commercial offices have major market potential in New York. Out of the square footage in New York, not counting residential spaces, offices incorporate 59% of the square footage and 77% of the energy use. That's over 420 million square feet. That's like 155 Empire State Buildings. So there's a lot of market potential there. And we're going to talk about some barriers to why commercial tenants have a hard time entering into the market. We have a poll on slido.com. If you haven't gotten a chance to enter it, please do so now. We're going to pull up the results and see what everyone said. Oh, yeah, it's CTP for Commercial Tenant Program. Ooh. Hey, Elihu, how do you pull up the word cloud? Huh. I think you guys can all see the word cloud, right? What are some of the, you haven't. So some of the big, there we go. Sorry about that. So here's the word cloud of some of the biggest answers we got. Paying attention to energy, something like that. Some other big ones, lease structures, retrofit, lack of education, they don't own the building, priorities. So these are definitely some major market barriers. Thank you all for contributing money. Sorry? Yeah, they don't pay their utility bills or they don't own their space. We're going to cover all of that a bit more. So thanks for sharing. So as some of you just identified, there's a lot of barriers to pursuing energy efficiency for commercial tenants. But thankfully for you guys, you have a team of Mythbusters here to give you some facts to share with your future clients to explain that it is accessible and actually a great investment to help increase your employee productivity, satisfaction, and well-being. So some of you may have heard that tenants just don't have that big of a piece of the pie, and it's not really worth them pursuing energy because it's such a small piece of the total building energy use. In fact, 40 to 60% of a typical building's energy use is controlled by the tenants, so it is worth pursuing. And if you incorporate a relationship with the building owner, you can unlock even greater savings. You may have also heard that maybe sustainability isn't their top priority, or energy efficiency doesn't really fit into their style. It's not really their jam. In fact, energy efficiency and design go hand in hand. As you can see, all of these spaces are beautifully designed, and these are all real-life examples of participants in the commercial tenant program. The top right is Swiss Re, which is a law firm. Oh no, sorry, an insurance firm. The bottom right is UTC, which is an aerospace firm, and the bottom left is Gensler, which is an architecture firm. So firms of all different shapes and sizes and industries are getting involved and making beautiful, efficient, and comfortable spaces. Something else you may have heard is that it's just going to take too long to pay back. It's not worth the investment, or the landlord is going to see all the benefit, not the tenants. This is also wrong. I'm not going to get into the details here because I don't want to give away too many answers for later on in the training, but there are a ton of low and no cost options, measures available to tenants. Here's a case study example from one of our participants, and 68% of their savings are due to zero cost measures. That's over $200,000 a year in electricity savings that they could be realizing. I also want to point out that increasing indoor air quality through energy efficiency can have some major productivity benefits. A study conducted by the Environmental Health Perspectives in 2015 found that green buildings have a 61% increase in cognitive function, and green plus buildings have almost double the cognitive function by having better indoor air quality. Oh, I forgot to mention, the slides will be available. We're going to share the slides with you at the end of the event, so no need to take pictures of slides along the way. Yep? How is green and green plus defined? I can give you a further description of that if you check out the study, but basically it's it's meeting particular LEED standards and whatnot. It was a little too elaborate to get into here, but the study defines it more.
It's like meeting code, that's a passing code. That's a good
yeah. So I'm going to walk you through the audit process. These steps are probably pretty familiar to all of you, but this is just to sort of set the stage. First, you need to collect the data. Then you can identify which energy conservation measures, or ECMs, are available as options. Then you need to conduct an energy and financial analysis hand in hand to determine which are the most feasible and valuable to your customer. Then present your findings to your customer so that they can decide to implement them. At the financial savings analysis point, I'll be passing it off to Anastasia to discuss that further. So now I'm going to turn to you. What do you think are some energy efficiency opportunities in tenant spaces? Everybody has some Post-it notes on their desks. If you could just write one, maybe two, all on separate Post-it notes, and you can come up, put them on the whiteboard, and we'll go through them together. And if anybody needs a pen, raise your hand, and I can bring some to you. No problem. Where'd the box go? Oh, right here. Thanks. Great. Thank you guys so much. This is awesome. So I'm going to go through, read them off. And what I'm going to do is sort of categorize them because it's important to identify which are only applicable in the tenant space and which are applicable in either the building or both. So, how do we want to do this? So occupancy sensors, what do you think? I think both, right? Energy Star appliances, we'll put that in tenant. Lighting and lighting controls, definitely both. What do you have there, Geeta? Motion and day sensors, that's another occupancy. Daylighting / dryer shades, that's mostly tenant. Raised cooling set point in server room, tenant. Interior storm / window films, that can be both. HVAC scheduled optimization, definitely both. HVAC controls, that's the same thing. Demand control ventilation, we got that in tenant. You guys are doing great. Temperature setbacks, reduced plug loads, server virtualization. Lighting sensors. HVAC controls, Energy Star equipment, awesome. Some of these are sticking better than others. Recycled materials, that's good. Server virtualization, smart sub-metering, behavioral change for real-time usage visualization, that's great. Night setbacks, LED lighting, better space utilization after hours. I think that's most of them. You guys really did a good job. This is covering a lot what we have. Thank you all. I'm going to just take these with me. So let's see. I sort of made a laundry list here. High efficiency lighting, we got that. Day lighting, Energy Star equipment. I think I'm going to touch on equipment power management in a bit. Window films, shade controls, occupancy sensors, temperature set points, demand control ventilation. You guys did really good. This is almost everything. Space layout, sub-metering. I think we missed third-party commissioning. I'll touch on that later on also. And reduce occupancy outside of business hours. You got a good mix there. Great job, everyone. So I think we're done with the training, right? Just kidding. So tenant measures can be put into 3 separate buckets. Equipment, pretty straightforward. I'm sure many of you are aware of this, just upgrading existing devices to more energy efficient technology. The behavior and process are a little more qualitative and a little more difficult to access, but they can really unlock some great benefits. Behavior is changing your employee habits to increase awareness and reduce waste. And process is making small changes to the business as usual mindset that can change how the internal conditioning operates to really increase productivity as well as reduce energy use. So for the equipment side of things, I think we need to address the vampire in the room. This is something that historically has just been sort of ignored. If you look at the pie on the left, that's the breakdown of energy sources in commercial buildings. 79% of that is represented by electricity. Of that electricity use, 33% is taken up by plug and process loads. Plug loads have been long ignored because how do you control what someone plugs into your outlet if they can do what they want, right? Well, with recent technology, there's been a huge boom in being able to control plug loads and address that third chunk of the pie. So these are a couple technologies available on the market. There are two types of technologies and two sort of control mechanisms. The first technology type is advanced power strips. They work in two ways. They're both pretty similar. There's a master control switch and array of peripheral switches. So in the master control or a tier 1 power strip, say a computer is plugged into the master, and you have your monitor, your printer, your external hard drive all plugged into the peripherals. When your computer is shut off, the power strip will cut power to all the peripherals so that they aren't drawing power when you're not using your computer. A tier 2 power strip has the additional benefit of some sort of occupancy sensing device. In the photo here, you can see the little extra cord with the black box. That's an infrared sensor that can tell when you're sitting in front of your computer. Some also work on the fact of sensing input in the computer. So if you're actively typing and clicking, it'll work. It'll keep all of your peripherals on. Whereas if it senses that your computer goes into sleep mode, it'll shut down your peripherals to reduce energy use. The other option is receptacle controls. The one in the top right is a smart plug. That plugs directly on top of your outlet and is Wi-Fi enabled so that you can see what energy is being used at any given time, and then you can remotely address and control those plug loads. And this can be done at an institutional scale. So if you install these in an entire office space, you can look and see how many plug loads are being used at any given time. And then control them to set them on a time schedule or whatnot based on the analysis that you find. The last option are physical receptacle controls. These are new outlets that you can install during a tenant fit out. These are a bit more invasive than the other options, but these are really great because they connect into your BMS system so that you can control your plugs just like your lights or your HVAC. The additional benefit here is that these can also be wired into existing occupancy sensors. So if you already have lighting occupancy sensors, these can work in the same manner. So that's unfortunate. Sorry about this. The formatting got messed up on this. This was a beautiful formula that you could all see. Trying to think. Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there. I think it's a Apple-Mac disagreement. All right. So it's kWh savings equals units times delta kWh weekday times hours weekday minus hours open weekday plus delta kWh weekend times hours weekend minus hours open weekend. Times 8760 over, I believe it's 168. All right, sorry about that. So this algorithm is provided by the New York TRM, which is a great resource that provides deemed savings algorithms for a wide variety of measures. This is a great resource for estimating potential savings. So this equation is provided And the only variables that you need to input are these two that I have underlined here. The remainder are recommended in the algorithm itself. So hours open on the weekdays and the count of hours open on the weekends. So that's pretty straightforward, and you can find that by having a candid conversation with your client. It's really important to have realistic estimations here, because as one of my colleagues says, garbage in, garbage out. If you put unrealistic estimations in, you're not going to get realistic results, and that's not helpful to you or your client. So I put an example up here. Say you have an office of about 100 employees, and I estimated 1.2 power strips per person. Think one at everybody's desk, and then a handful in break rooms, conference rooms, communal work areas, et cetera. And you're open 12 hours on every weekday and 5 hours cumulatively on the weekends. That per power strip results in 95 kWh savings per year, which results in over 11,000 kWh for the whole office for the year. That's a huge savings, and that's just for a tier 1 power strip. I do need to caveat this with, I'm so sorry, the formatting on this is still messed up. That I need to caveat the plug load management is important, but there are lots of options available, and you can increase your savings by implementing more than one, but you get diminishing returns on individual measure savings. So here are two examples of participants in the program, White & Case, which is a law firm, and Gensler, an architecture firm. They both decided to install 3 plug load management measures, including Energy Star equipment, equipment power management, which is changing your settings institutionally to set your computers to default into sleep mode or shut off at a certain interval. And lastly, automatic receptacle control, which is what I just spoke about. Overall, they had great savings. White & Case found 12% savings portion overall for the project, and Gensler had 76% savings for this piece of their project. So it's important to keep in mind interactive effects of multiple measures affecting the same types of loads. So next, I'd like to talk about behavior measures. As I mentioned before, these are a little bit more qualitative, and you'll have to have open conversations with your clients to find out what would be the best for their circumstance specifically. I have a case study here, Paul Hastings. This is another law firm. They were moving spaces, and they wanted to downsize to save money on rent. But they also decided to sort of reinvent the typical law office layout. Historically, they've had big corner offices, and all of the important people have big offices around the perimeter, which is sort of the prime real estate. But that's only a few people. So what they did instead was they had open cubicles and communal workspaces lining the perimeter of their space, and then they put all of the offices on the interior of the space and used glass walls instead to let daylight soak the entire space, making it a more comfortable work environment and putting the prime real estate available to a much wider percentage of their staff. They also lawyers are known to work long hours, and so what they did is they made a program to encourage staff to congregate into particular areas after hours or work from home so that they can turn off HVAC and lighting in unoccupied spaces. We also found out from a different firm that was doing the same thing, trying to reduce occupancy in outside hours. They actually brought in pizza and beverages into that communal space so that they would encourage people further to move to that space after hours so they could shut off the conditioning. It's also important to note that if they do decide to turn off the conditioning in the other parts of the building, people probably won't want to work there anyways because it's not going to be very comfortable. Lastly, we have process measures. This is really all about controls. These are small settings that can make a big difference. You can raise your set points, not just in the working space, but also in data centers. You can change your occupancy settings. So if it's, say the default is after 30 minutes of vacancy, the lights will turn off. If you switch that to 15 minutes, there's savings right there that are easily accessible and shouldn't affect your staff on their day-to-day work habits. You can also have networked lighting controls. This will let you individually address specific fixtures so that you can have certain ones on and off at different times of the day, depending on who's working, where, and when. As I mentioned, you can change your computer settings. They also offer software packages that you can install institutionally that will let you manage this at a whole company scale. And lastly, third-party commissioning. This is a bit more expensive because it's bringing in an outside party, but they make sure in the commissioning process that your systems are doing what they're supposed to do, because over time, things happen and stop working right. So it's important to have sort of that checkup, just like you do at your doctor. So now that we've identified some measures that you can look for, you need to know what data to collect. First and foremost, it's really important to have a conversation with your client about their lease type. I'm not going to get into the details of this, but the main thing is to find out, are they responsible for their utility bills or not? Because depending on their lease structure, it's going to change how much they're going to be willing and able to do as part of energy efficiency upgrades. And there's a few pieces of information. This is just sort of a laundry list of what to make sure to collect at the building scale as well as at the tenant level. So at the building scale, you want to make sure you get the heating, fuel, HVAC system types, the age, the capacity, efficiency, as well as the envelope details, window types, insulation, et cetera. And in the tenant space, you want to get, there's a lot more details. I'm not going to go over this whole thing, but this is a laundry list for your reference when you start working on these projects after the training. Lastly, just some recommended resources as you're working on your energy analyses. These are a couple tools that I find really useful. The New York Technical Reference Manual, which is what I referenced previously. There's also Energy Star, which has a wide variety of resources from savings calculators to certified appliances, as well as portfolio benchmarking. There's the NREL plug load tool. This is a really in-depth spreadsheet analysis that will walk you through data collection and savings estimation for installing plug load controls. Lastly, Design Lights Consortium is a great tool. It's a huge database of tested and certified LED fixtures to make sure that you're choosing and recommending high-quality LEDs. Sure, yeah. We're going to switch it up, and we're going to do a little open discussion before we let you off for the break. Sorry about that.
And before we do the open discussion, I just want to do, sorry.
That's okay.
This is not scripted. A quick shout out to Jack Jenkins, raise your hand, from Robert Director Associates. Coincidentally, he actually worked on the case studies that we were all talking about today. So we ran several pilots through the NYSERDA program to really get a good sense of what the opportunities were of doing work in tenant spaces. And Jack worked on Paul Hastings, Gensler, and the third one, and White and Case as well. So there you are, the resource right there. If you have any questions during the break on any of those projects, feel free to talk. And sorry for putting you on the spot.
Well, can you go back 2 slides?
Sure, yeah.
So I'm wondering, how do you actually get information? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I think we need to use the mic for the people who are online, right?
Yep.
For the recording.
Yeah,
okay.
So we're just using the mic. So if you have a question, I'll come over with the mic so that the people on the live stream can hear what you're asking.
So I just wondered if anyone knows how you would get the information on team placement, or think about that. If they haven't moved yet, are you starting to design that and then model what would work better? Or are you asking them, do they already have a plan?
Yeah.
Maybe others in the room have a thought on actually how to get that sort of information.
If anyone has something they want to share, if not, I can make a comment. Sure.
That's fairly easy because usually when you're starting something, a tenant space, or even if you're familiar with a tenant, you go through a programming process that will allow you to gather information about the requirements for each of the departments or divisions or whatever. And honestly, it was interesting to see this because we don't have this question in our programming process, but we will add it now to the programming process because it's definitely something that we'd want to discuss with our clients and alert them to the situation for after hours and to bring them all together. So yeah, it's not difficult to get as long as you have that, your work, part of your scope is doing the programming for and the gathering of the information up front.
Do you have something you want to add?
I have a related question about getting the data. If anybody has best practices on how to use the Con Ed information app, especially if the building, the tenants are not sub-metered, does it make any sense, depending on how many accounts they have, to get the data for the building and then try to figure out the details?
Did I see another hand over there? Thanks.
I mean, it's just adding a comment to the previous question. So in the case of White & Case, it was very much as you described. We sat down as part of this process and discussed some kind of ideas that aren't normally thought about, and this was one of them. We kind of said, well, hey, could you potentially, we were actually suggesting something that was more like the Paul Hastings example. Could you have an area where you ask people to move late at night? And they said, well, we don't think we can do that with our people, but they realized that they have certain teams that work late. So they have a whole department on litigation that tends to work late, and there were a couple of other smaller departments, so they grouped them on the same floors.
That's great. And one more thing, to address Anastasia's question, if they haven't actually moved yet, sometimes asking what isn't working right now is a great way to figure out what might work better in a new space. And I'm sorry, you asked about the Con Ed information app. What was your question again? Oh, right. That's a tricky one. If they're moving spaces, it's important to find out what is going to be in the new space. If not, you can if you have the available resources, you can choose to meter to find out a little bit more and to establish a baseline. Any other questions? And we want to hear a little bit from you. So what is something that you all think that the NYSERDA Commercial Tenant Program would be able to do to help you access commercial tenants more easily? The program is a resource for all of you, so what can we do to help?
I think something simple like advertising it, because many people that would use it don't even know about it.
Great. Anyone else?
I think that's it. I mean, you just got to get more eyes looking at the program.
More eyes looking at the program, more marketing? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe if there's a way you can reach out to landlords like about the program, and then they can, if they're interested in having their tenants be involved, they can actually provide a list of tenants maybe to NYSERDA, and NYSERDA can publish that or something like that, so that we at least know like who to target or
great
reach out to.
And I think it is advertising, and just to add a little more to that, it's advertising both to potential tenants, but also to the sorts of people that are involved really early in tenant projects. That are kind of, they're probably seeing many projects, and there are gatekeepers to getting this stuff to happen rather than the project to roll on before anyone's thought about this stuff.
Right.
I agree on the advertising and marketing, but I found that word of mouth testimonials from business owners are a lot more powerful, and a lot of times they don't reach out, and it's a little bit of hand-holding to just say, would you talk to your neighbor? And if there's not a conflict, they're willing to do it, but that's some heavy lifting. That's a lot of feet on the ground to help with that.
So I'll be a little bit honest in the sense that a lot of it starts with the design professionals, and sometimes you've got sophisticated clients that come to the table with the knowledge, and but a lot of times it's us who are kind of recommending things to the client, and a lot of times we're already under a lot of pressure and having to do a lot of things, and to add one more aspect to it becomes sometimes difficult. So if there's a resource for us that can kind of make it a lot easier, somebody that we can, you know, reach out to, specifically a person or something that can help and maybe be more of a representative and more of a tool or a resource, that would be really, really helpful and make it easier on us and not put more burden on us. Because, you know, to ask a client to spend money on the installation and then also to spend money on the, you know, the design professionals up front, it's just, you know, it's like a double hit. Why, you know, why should they do it unless they're really engaged in it, you know? So, you know, to kind of get them interested, you want to be able to make it easy for them and easy for us also.
Great, yeah. And ERS offers a lot of those services. We're the outreach consultant for NYSERDA, so we're happy to help facilitate the process as well. Anything else? Great, thank you all so much for your feedback. Feel free to take a couple minutes. We'll rejoin. What time is it?
Almost 10.
All right, so we'll rejoin at 10:15, and Anastasia will pick back up. Feel free to refill your coffee and grab some pastries. Thank you all.
Okay, everyone, let's get back together and we'll get off of our break and into the next section of this workshop this morning. So hi, everyone. My name is Anastasia O'Rourke. I was here last week helping on the business development training. And here today, I'm going to be helping walk through and teach you a bit, but also learn from you about doing financial modeling and analysis of some of these energy conservation measures. But more broadly, I'm going to position this into how do you do the analysis, yes, but really show and express the value that you're creating by doing this, and help overcome some of those barriers which we heard about of people being busy, having a lot of their plate, not necessarily being interested in this, finding it complicated, and so looking a little bit how to present the results in a sort of more high impact way. So we do have an exercise as part of this, and we'll walk through an actual financial model, and I promise you it won't be as dry as it sounds. So I do want to learn a little bit about who's in the room. So could you raise your hands if you work for a very small firm, say less than 5 people? Okay, a few. So do you work for a firm that's, say, 5 to 100 people? Okay, much more in that space. Anyone 100 to 1,000? Anyone over 1,000? Over 10,000? No, okay. That's helpful, thank you. Now, who works for a design or an architecture firm? Or is a designer or an architect? Okay. Engineering or engineers? Great. Anyone just in real estate, say a broker or an investor in real estate? What other categories do we have? Studying right now, university? Yep. Any sort of category of job that I've missed? Could you tell me more? Software. Software, great. Or yeah, perhaps like a technology provider. We had a couple of them last week. Okay, thanks for letting me know. I wanted to share a bit about me. You may be wondering where my lovely accent is from. It's from Sydney, Australia. I've been working in the sustainability space for 20 years, which is crazy. I mean, part of that time I was studying, so keep that in mind. But in the late 90s in Sydney, we had the Sydney Olympics in year 2000. I got really lucky and worked on the green games, so the green side of the Sydney Olympics. And I don't know if you know this, but the Sydney Olympics site was a brownfield site. And they did a lot of urban renewal in that area and put a lot of effort into public transport and all these things. And so we were working as a little design team with this big project that had a very strict deadline, like the Olympics is coming, to integrate where we could various green design features, both into the facilities, but also things like the paving and the shade and the trees and so on. So it was pretty fun and pretty eye-opening to me, and I've stayed in this space ever since. So I did study undergrad in Sydney. I did a master's in industrial environmental management in Sweden, came to the US and did a PhD at Yale. And that I actually focused on clean tech and venture capital, and that's how I know a bit about running financial models, and I started a company and I was the CFO for that company. Now I work with Industrial Economics, which is about a 110-person firm in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And we do a lot of work on sustainability, energy, sometimes program evaluation. And yeah, it's a great firm, so I've been having fun doing that. So yeah, there's just a photo of me for people following this online. So I wanted to give that background to you. And some of the material I'm going to walk through now I covered last week, but I'm going to do it a bit more quickly. When we think about creating value through, for tenants or for building owners, through doing energy efficiency type measures of all the different types we talked about this morning, I want to step back for a minute and just think, well, really, what do we mean by value and how do we, calculate that? I mean, we can definitely look at, financial value, and we're going to do this today, but sometimes we can look at non-financial values, things that add to the space that are harder to measure in dollar terms, or even social benefits, like, okay, we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by doing this work, or we're going to improve potentially health and productivity, but it may be harder to measure those in dollar terms and do that in a convincing way. So if we want to make a sort of a convincing value proposition, which is what we want to do here with these financial analyses, in the end, we're going to say these are the best measures to go for, and this is why you should justify making this investment. You really want to think, let's get this to the point where it's a clear value proposition, a clear statement that's got a beginning, middle, end, and a clear recommendation, and do that both with words in a report, but also images. And especially for the people who are designers in the room, you know that the power that a clear, crisp image can have in helping someone make a decision that you think and you recommend is the right one. So if you want to build an effective value proposition, the main thing you need to think is value to who? So who's on the other end of this? Who? Because the value to them is, it's not about you and how great you are. And the main mistake I see in sort of sales kind of in this space of marketing is, we're so great because we're this firm and we do X, Y, Z. Not that interesting to the client. It's more, they're more worried about their own situation, right? What's this going to, what's in it for me? So you need to be able to say with numbers, if you can, what's in it for them. Focus on them. So to know that, though, you need to know who they are and what it is they value. And they may not value at all energy efficiency or climate change or anything else that we might care about, right? They may be absolutely uninterested, but you can still sell them effectively an energy conservation measure project by just talking in the financial savings that they're going to achieve by this. Or understanding how do they measure their own performance. If they're a building owner, maybe they're all worried about their net operating income, and I'll show you how that's calculated. So just use the language that they're already used to if you can. And it's really worth taking a bit of time to understand the client from this point of view. I know as engineers and as designers, you're always trying to understand your client, right? Because that's part of the job. That's part of being a good designer. But think about it from the financial point of view as well. So for tenants, there are some sort of typical steps and typical kind of opportunities that you have to introduce ideas of energy conservation. There's before the lease, there's during some sort of design, construction, or fit-out phase, and then once they're actually in a space or continue to be in a space, there's definitely some measures that you can think about there, even if they're not moving. And down the bottom here, we have all sorts of opportunities to integrate energy conservation measures. So this is adapted from the Urban Land Institute, have some really great resources. They have a tenant optimization program, 10 steps to savings. So if you wanted to read about all of these factors, that's a great resource. But in the pre-lease stage, before any lease is even signed, you can look at, well, what's the criteria for selecting the team that's going to do this work? So does this design team have energy efficiency expertise, or can they bring it in? Can they access it? Or the site selection itself. If you think about, some buildings are easier to work with than others on this topic. And then you can add ECM, energy conservation measures, terms into leases themselves. And there's some good case studies and examples of that. You may hear the term green lease. Typically, that just means some section of a lease that talks about the green dimensions of, who pays what bills, if there's any savings, who does it accrue to. And green leases can incorporate more than just energy. It could be, say, the indoor air quality issues or green cleaning products, so on and so forth. In our space right now, we're just talking about the energy component. So in the design construction stage is where we want to model different options and potential return on investment. That's kind of where we are here. And then, as we heard earlier from Kelly, there's many things that can be done once the tenant is in the space. Now, the question I have on that stuff is, you can model it. Are they actually going to do it? And it's maybe a different set of stakeholders that you're dealing with. It's not the facilities manager, it's the HR manager. It's the IT department doing the settings and so on. So it may get you into areas of this organization, your client, into other sets of stakeholders that you may not have thought of as, you know, being part of an energy sort of, or a design or a fit out. So you want to, again, thinking who's the client, who's going to benefit, who do I need to get involved? Think carefully about that. Also in terms of how you present the information to make it effective. And some organizations are very motivated by gaining recognition for their work. So if they're LEED, you know, platinum certified, they're going to be mentioning that a lot. Other organizations may not care less about the recognition, but may care a lot about the savings and the operating expenses. So just, you know your audience. So some of the different energy conservation measures and ways that you can sort of express the value to the different audiences. For tenants, a lot of the time you want to think about it as a reduced operating expense. It's just going to cost it. If they're paying the bills of the energy bills, it's just like, you know, over time it's going to cost them less. It's pretty straightforward. But you could also start to measure or talk about this, you know, and there's case studies for all of these, that it can improve employee satisfaction of working there. They find the space more pleasant to work in. Productivity, especially if there's like air quality issues in the building and that you're addressing because you happen to be looking at the HVAC system and you happen to notice that it's not operating well. Yeah, you came in with the energy intention, but you come out with an increase in productivity, which obviously most employers are going to be pretty interested in. Sometimes you can get favorable financing through doing these sorts of measures. And there's various tax incentives built into buying energy efficient equipment, especially bigger sets of equipment. And for building owners, similar thing, although they're more interested in tenant turnover, reducing the time of vacancies, the actual asset value of the building, and can you show that it's grown in you know, how it's valued, occupant satisfaction, how high a rent can they charge? They can charge a higher rent because they're doing all this cool stuff. Having quality tenants that aren't moving out as often is going to add huge value to them. And the same sorts of factors on some of the tax benefits that are there as well. Okay, so I want to break this down a little. So for the building owners and then for the tenants. So two key financial measures for building owners are the cash flow and the asset value. So on the cash flow side, this net operating income is an often cited measure of financial performance for building owners. And it's building up of some of these other factors underneath. But you know, if they can model out and say their rental income, what they're expecting, that all builds up into showing that, you know, the cash flow in time that they're expecting over the next, you know, 20 years from owning this building is both stable and growing and, you know, valuable to them. And then on the asset side, so, you know, this is an asset, it's a building, it's going to be there for a long time. It's actually a bit easier to model some of this stuff because they're long-term assets than some other things in the, you know, some software evaluations and so on. Yeah, we're really looking at market value. So, you know, like with a house or an apartment, you look at comps, right? You look at comparables. And you can start to see, like, does the value increase through being a more energy efficient building over time? So I just wanted to break out this net operating income a little bit more. It's not very complicated, actually, because you may come across this measure. So it's simply the gross operating income minus operating expenses. So the gross operating income is the effective rental income, plus any other income they're getting from the building, And then the operating expenses, it really depends on the type of leases that they have, the tenants. So if they're having leases that are an absolute gross lease, the owner, them, pay all of the operating expenses of the building, okay? So in this situation, if you're trying to sell energy efficiency to the tenant, it's going to be hard because the owner of the building is the one paying the bills. That's the case with our firm in Cambridge, Mass. We have very little, and we have a difficult landlord, actually, Porter Square, who's been there forever and is absolutely uninterested. So our firm has its own little green committee. We tried all these interventions, but there's just a limit to what we can actually do, in that scenario. And, we have a 20-year lease there, so that's not coming up for change anytime soon. So it's interesting because you start to think about these things in a very sort of tangible way. Or if you're renting, an apartment yourself personally and the landlord is paying the bills, what's your incentive to turn down the heat? I've noticed in New York City, people's buildings are really hot and they're opening the windows because it's just way too hot. And that's because of this incentive structure that's happening. But you do have different types of leases, right? You have a net lease where the tenant pays all the operating expenses. They do exist. More typical is something in between where they're dividing up expenses. But the first thing you want to do if you're trying to figure this out is what type of lease, and really look at the lease terms. It's not hard to read to figure this out. And essentially, if you're able to reduce the operating expenses by saving energy, you're going to increase your net operating income for the owner. That's what it comes down to. One quick thing about this does not take into account time value of money at all, okay? There's no discount rates applied. There's it's pretty blunt measure, but it's commonly used. So for tenants, the sort of measures we want to look at are, on the cash flow side, and then thinking about what's the use of the space for. Well, people who work there. That's ultimately who we care about. And on the cash flow side, again, if they're responsible for all or some of those operating expenses, reduced utility costs can really help to reduce the operating expenses. And what we're going to do right at the end of this workshop is say, well, how can we make this a bit more interesting to someone like, oh yeah, we're going to spend less on energy. I'm so excited. It's hard. It's not very exciting to sell that to someone. They're like, oh, great, ho-hum. But if you can start to show that how the numbers accumulate and really add up and really actually make a huge difference to their bottom line, it starts to make a bit more, sense to them that as a good business decision. So beyond doing an audit or an energy analysis, kind of a walkthrough, there are a bunch of steps that you can take. So this is from betterbricks.com, which I believe, if you go into it further, it's through the Better Building Challenge program of the Department of Energy. So they suggest to, establishing a baseline for your space of what's the energy that's already used.